Professor Adrian Whitteman, PhD RD of San Jose State University's Department of Nutrition, Food Science and Packaging, presents Careers in Food Management. If you'd like to learn more, subscribe to Professor Whitteman's YouTube channel or check out her other videos on her YouTube page by clicking the icon at the top right-hand corner of the video at any time. Or visit San Jose State University's Food Management concentration page or Nutrition, Food Science, and Packaging Department page through the links provided below. And now for our interview with Leah Gorman, Dietetic Technician Registered.
My name is Leah Gorman. I am a dietetic technician registered, and my position at the Community Hospital Monterey Peninsula is a nutrition technician.
How long have you been doing your job? What kind of degrees and certifications do you have?
I've been working at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula for about 3 years. Um, I have a undergraduate degree in food science and human nutrition. I got my DPD from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm a dietetic technician registered through the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics.
What has your career path been like? How did you get to where you are today?
I graduated from the University of Hawaii with the food science and human nutrition degree with a concentration in dietetics. So I got my DPD there. I came home to Santa Cruz and I applied as a dietary manager at a skilled nursing facility in Santa Cruz. I started working there as a year, got really good hands on experience with managing a kitchen, managing employees, menu planning, recipes, um, like specialized diets, your purees, your dysphagia diets, and did some patient interviews, but not as much as I wanted. So I wanted more of like the clinical patient experience. So I applied to be a dietetic technician at the Community Hospital in Monterey. And I started working here about 3 years ago. And I have evolved from being just a per diem technician where I would work in the hospital, mostly weekends. Every patient that came in, I screened. That meant I looked at history and looked for nutrition triggers. Um, I did that. I also worked in our outpatient program, which was called Kids Eat Right. And we went to schools all in Monterey County, taught nutrition lessons, and we even did like a little cooking demo, which was really fun. And then I also worked at the acute rehab facility that Community Hospital owns. It's called Westland House. And so I floated here and there and I was all over the map for close to a year. And then I got a full time position at Westland House where I am currently.
What's your work schedule like? Do you work every day?
Yeah, so when I was per diem at the hospital, I worked, like I said, mostly weekends with a rotation schedule. Most holidays we get off as like nutrition staff in general, as far as dietitians and technicians. Um, but my schedule now I was working Tuesday through Saturday, so I would consistently work one weekend day. It has evolved since COVID and lots of changes have happened. So I currently am working 4 full days a week. My position is a 0.8, which means I only work 64 hours a pay period. Still considered full time, but my schedule has changed a lot. But now I work basically like a 9 to 5, 4 days a week.
How do you usually spend your day?
My typical day is there's some consistency, but it can be different. So I do all the food ordering for Westland House, which means I need to get produce, meat, bread, seafood, and we use US foods for dry goods and things like that. We have a milk vendor, so I have to order every single item of food that comes in, as well as plates, bowls, cups. I mean, you break it, you replace it. Bigger equipment we do as a team, but um, the little things is what I have to take care of. So, really, in the morning, I always do rounds through the kitchen, check and make sure we have everything we need for the day. If we ran out of this, or go and get that, or whatever it needs to be. Usually there's a food order that needs to be done, and it's always in the morning. The vendors like to get things in early, so for the next day delivery. um, I do staffing, so some positions you would do staffing and sometimes you don't, but I do. And which means if our census gets to a certain level, like we have this many patients, I need to call in somebody else to come into work. Or if we have fewer patients, I have to call people off. So it's constantly monitoring that. Um, and then I always watch tray line at least one meal. So if I'm not here for both breakfast and lunch, then I just watch lunch or whichever. Um, and that makes sure I verify patients' names, diets, and then of course what gets on their tray. So if they have a certain diet and they are missing a protein source or a milk or something, I catch those things. I also taste the food, so that's kind of fun. You get to taste all the food for the day. You sometimes have the same food day in or day out, but you still taste it because every time you make it, it could be different. And even the purees, you taste the purees, you taste it all.
How do you interact with patients?
As far as the patients, I interview every single patient that I see in person. So I go in their room, I ask them about their appetite, I ask them about their weight, um, and of course their food preferences, which every patient loves to talk about. And they love to tell you about what things they liked and didn't like about the food at your institution. And you do the best to meet their needs. So we have some patients that are used to sleeping till 10 a.m. and they don't eat breakfast till noon. So how do I meet that patient's needs is my job when I talk to them and go on the floor and try and make their healing process as easy as possible, because sometimes changing their frequency of meals or is could be a huge change for them that they're not willing to make, and that's okay. So how can we make that happen? Also looking for any patients that aren't eating well enough or eating at all. Maybe it's they don't like the food, or maybe their appetite, and trying to overcome barriers together. Like, how can we get some food that you like, or explaining to them how our kitchen works so that they can get things that they like. So it's a lot of like, I guess, problem solving all day. A lot of problem solving. So you have to be really kind of quick and know what we have to offer, because if you don't know the food and you don't know what it tastes like, or um, you don't know how the kitchen works, it's really hard to meet someone's needs. So it's great to know the ins and outs of everything.
What skills would a person need to succeed at your job?
As um, a kitchen manager or a dietary manager or even a supervisor, i'm I'm a shift leader, so I'm not even considered a supervisor, but my role is to supervise and to lead. So for example, we had maybe last month or a month before, we had a water main break in Monterey, and it affected a huge part of the county. And it was a boil only order, which meant you had to boil the water before you could even consume it. But we went a step further and said you can't even boil the water. So, when you come in on a day like that, and you have to then activate your emergency protocol and start using your emergency water ASAP, you've got to have quick problem solving skills as well as know your resources. Reach out to, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have community hospitals, the Monterey Peninsula, as my home base. So if I need something, I call up there and they send it down. So I have a great resource. Um, and so we are able to activate that, emergency protocol pretty quick and get things rolling. And also, your staff in the kitchen, they are, your frontliners, your assets in this job. And when you go out and talk clinically to patients, you are also representing the kitchen and representing the food that you create in the kitchen. And you may not personally be cooking it, but you should might as well take responsibility for it. And so the staff that I have are awesome. I'm not their manager, but I'm their shift leader, and they report to me. And I rely on them just as much as they do on me. So having a good team and being a team player as well as a leader, um, because I mean, there's been days where I've had to cook or I've had to do dishes because somebody is sick or we can't, find this or that, or somebody gets hurt. And you've got to be able to do that. And some people aren't willing to do that, and that's okay. But in this job, you absolutely have to do that. If somebody calls out or you can't find a replacement or somebody's hurt or there's an emergency, yeah, you're going to be hand pumping water for, 35 patients or whatever it is, because that's just how you have to serve your patients. And so I think being a strong leader, also being able to be on the front line and cook and do dishes and pump water or stay overtime or whatever it is that you need to do, the flexibility and the responsibility of every aspect of the kitchen, um, really needs to you really need to accept that and take responsibility for it, because it's not just a type of position where you come in and you see your patients and you go. Like, there's a lot more that goes on here, and so it's kind of wholeheartedly taking responsibility for that. I'm 100% an extrovert. I think that if you don't like working with people, it's a challenging job to have. However, there are a lot of, like, the physical therapists that I work with, a lot of them are introverts, and but they say that they can interact with the patients because they have one-on-one sessions and it's more of a like private conversation. Whereas for me, as a leader in the kitchen, where I have multiple staff that come to me all day every day, I have even nursing staff coming to me all day every day, and all these different patients. I may see up to 12 different patients in one day personally. So for me, being an extrovert is definitely necessary, but like there are certain positions that you can still work with people, but it's more intimate, and that introvert is, they enjoy that and they can handle that. But when I have the volume of people that I deal with every day, it definitely helps to be comfortable, like talking with people and changing your, game on a whim, because you've got a patient that's really angry and then you have a patient that's really sad, and you have a lot of different personalities, and you got to be able to adapt. So I think it's very helpful.
What do you like about your job?
I like working with people. So I love seeing the patients, whether they like to see me or not, because sometimes they don't like when I say I'm from nutrition services and they talk about the lunch that they didn't like. But the feedback you get from patients is valid and needed, and that's how we change recipes, or we change meals, or we look at different cooking methods. And that's what I love, because I'm a chef or and baker at heart, so I love the creation part of food. And when you can get feedback from patients and they're not all the same, not all the feedback is good, and you have to be okay with that. But um, I love hearing what they have to say, and I love helping them, you know, get better, whether it's just adding a yogurt to their breakfast and that's all that'll make them happy, or it's totally changing their whole menu with them and taking an entire hour to get it right. I love working with people. I love the creation and the creativity part of working in a kitchen. So it is it is labor intensive, though. Like, it is a lot of stimulation and exertion when you're dealing with so many different types of people all day, but that's what I really like about it.
What are some of the biggest challenges in your line of work?
There is always going to be a challenge when you work in nutrition services anywhere, in a big hospital, in even a restaurant. You're not going to please everybody. And that's nearly impossible. Even the best restaurants in the world, there's always a bad critic. So, um, the biggest challenge is meeting people's needs within reason, I would say, um, because we have a population that needs nutrition, needs to be healthy, is trying to get better, um, but hates the food. And so, how do you find that? Like, how do you overcome that? And that's the biggest challenge, because we're not a restaurant, we're not a five-star, but we do the best we can in trying to um, meet the patient halfway if they're willing. And now sometimes they're not willing, and that is, and how to work with that. Um, whether it's you like meet in the middle, or you offer them to have their family bring food. I mean, whatever it is, meeting that need is the biggest challenge in this situation. There's also challenges that are just like the nature of working with so many different people is you might have nursing staff that wants something some way, but the kitchen can only do it one way. Or even the patient too, the patient wants their burger this way, but you can only cook it this way. So when you work with people, and especially with food, it's always going to be hard to meet needs across the board. You're always going to be like 50%, or maybe even 75% if you're lucky, um, meeting needs. And that even means happiness as a result of the meal. So, that is the biggest challenge in any kitchen, food related, anything that you will work in.
Do you work with other nutrition professionals?
At Community Hospital of Monterey, we have I think we have like 8 inpatient dietitians, and we have 3 that will float to Westland House. So when I was working at the hospital as a technician, I was working like shoulder to shoulder with the dietitians, and sometimes I still go up there and work. I'll cover shifts, or relief day or something like that. I'll work as a technician up at the hospital, so I know them all personally really well at this point. And for the most part, when I'm working as a technician in the hospital, I'm looking for patients that could possibly be an RD patient. Now, there's always clinical judgment. So when you're for example, if you have a patient that has, is possibly on comfort care but is extremely malnourished and could probably use some menu assistance, but your dietitians, it, you know, do you need to consult them for that? Probably not. You can do that yourself as a technician. Like I would call the patient or I'd go see the patient and help them. So with the dietitians, sometimes I run things off of them, like, hey, I have this patient, what do you think? And sometimes they know the patient, they've been there before, or they give me advice on, well, what do you think is best? Well, this is what I think. Okay. And so we kind of bounce ideas off of each other. When I'm inpatient, sometimes they'll ask me to do things if they don't have time, like go see this patient and it's for preferences and stuff. I can do that, right? They need to go do a diet ed that I can't do. As far as working at Westland House, our dietitian comes about once a week, and it is one of the dietitians from the main hospital. So they'll come down here, they'll do their assessment. They have a full assessment that they do. For the most part, I have gotten all the information that they need for their full assessment when I do the initial screen, is what we call it. Um, so, for the most part, if there's any interventions that need to be made, I usually have already made them or suggested them. Or the dietitian will maybe just go a step further and like look at the meds or a multivitamin or something like that that's not within my scope. Um, the dietitian and I, we like if there's a concern that I have for a patient, I will like consult the dietitian about it. For the most part, I can do like snacks and supplements as long as the doctor orders them. That's like a skilled nursing facility thing. But I can recommend those things. I can recommend diet changes. I just physically can't change the orders or place the orders. The doctor has to do that. So um, we do in a skilled nursing facility relatively the same thing. Of course, they have a higher scope of practice. They can look at other things that I don't look at. Um, but it's more or less the same. Like we'll bounce ideas off of each other. We'll work on projects together, like the menus and the recipes and stuff like that. Um, so we don't work together all the time. A lot of my work is independent, and then they'll come once a week and kind of check on things. But we do collaborate if needed, and we can do that through various platforms. We have an instant messenger that we use at work, and then email is always good. Or we have these Voceras, which are kind of like walkie talkies. We can call each other back and forth. So we can get a hold of each other in just about any way possible.
What's the average compensation for your position?
So when I first started, when I was a dietary manager, I think I was getting like 20, maybe close to $30 an hour. I'm not really sure. Um, they no, I don't think it was that much. Must have been like 25 maybe. Um, which is good. I mean, for starting as a dietary manager without any experience. And then at community hospital, they pay a little bit higher just in general. And then, a really nice benefit package and paid leave accrual is really good here. So I can get paid anywhere from, I would say, $25 an hour to maybe even like $37 to $39 an hour, depending on how long you've been at the company and at least at community hospital, your seniority and things like that really matter here. So the longer you're here, the higher on the steps you can go. And really nice benefits, and really good paid leave accrual too, which is nice. It's different than working like somewhere where you have these certain paid holidays and then you have certain amount of sick hours. Paid leave works totally different, which confused me so much when I first started here, but it is really generous.
What are the opportunities for growth?
As far as growth, I mean, as a technician, most people want to be a dietitian. However, we have a full-time technician at community hospital where she works Monday through Friday, and she's been there for 10 years, and she doesn't want to be a dietitian. And we're glad because we need her. um, so there, most people, this is a stepping stone to be a dietitian, but so there's growth there in the fact that like if you can work well with your team and well in your institution and they see that in you, they may want you as a dietitian, and that might be a possibility for me. As far as like community hospital in itself, um, you know, there's a lot of growth happening just in this institution. So, they're opening up a behavioral health facility for children that's, going to be the first on in this area, period. So there's opportunity for maybe they'll need a dietitian over there. Maybe, there's always shifting in the, so you never know if somebody's going to retire, but it's all, I'm looking at it more as where's my dietitian spot, because that's where I know my next step is. But for a technician, there's, I wouldn't necessarily say there's no room for growth, but I think there's room to spread. What by meaning like I worked outpatient, I worked inpatient, I worked at the SNF. I also work on tons of projects. So once you get your foot in the door and you enjoy where you work and they enjoy you, there may be opportunities that you don't even know about, which happened to me. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about outpatient. I didn't know about all these projects that I'm on now. Um, so things can start coming your way if you are open to that. And I think when I came here, I was ready. I wanted more opportunity. I wanted more experience. I was like an open door. And the team saw that, and that's I think why I got here. But if you want to just be a 9 to 5er and full-time technician and that's what's good for you, then great, because you're also an asset to the team too. So it's kind of what you put out is what you'll get back. And most technicians I think are wanting to be a dietitian, but if you're not, there's so much other opportunities that you can take advantage of, even just in your own position, which is really cool.
What special projects are you working on now?
As a department, we do various projects, just kind of depends on where the need is. And the biggest project I've been on is our pantries in the hospital, as well as at Westland House. We have each floor has a little refrigerator and pantry section where they can get quick snacks for their patients if they need something, crackers, pudding, applesauce for med pass and things like that. And I have been tasked with revamping the whole pantry of the entire hospital and Westland House, which means looking at the products we stock. Okay, do we need, 10 different juices, or can we do 5? And this is a budget thing. It's also a food waste thing, which our team and our head chef is huge on food waste and sustainability. So that's a focus of ours. Um, Looking at the prices, where we get these items, the pack sizes, how can we reduce how much we send, but how do we need to deliver more often? or less, or, kind of finding this balance of what can we put on the floor that will meet the needs of our patients as well as our budget needs and goals and our labor goals too. So that project, I'm not kidding you, been going on for probably 2 years now, but it became much bigger than we thought. When you open a can of worms, you may open 10 more. So that's what we found, but it's actually been really cool because we're starting to find these products that aren't really necessary. And maybe we just think we need them because we've always had them, and kind of shifting our mindset to like, we don't need 4 different kinds of regular coffee. Maybe 2 is okay. And also like shifting people's like understanding for that too. Like we may think that's a good idea, but they may not because they like that 4th kind of coffee. So we're just kind of dealing with a lot of different things that have come our way, and the way we do the ordering for these pantries is through a computerized system, and so trying to figure that out has been really interesting. So that's the biggest project I've been on for a long time. Um, Another thing I've worked on is our menus, which is really fun actually. Because you can write out a meal and, cauliflower, rice, and fish, and like, oh, that sounds great. When you put it on a white plate with white fish and white cauliflower and white rice, it looks absolutely horrible. So you what I do is when I see the meal plated and I eat the food, and then I get the feedback. And sometimes it's not just from the patients, it's from the staff. And they're like, none of the patients ate this. They don't like this. So I talk to the chef and we try and come up with new ideas or new meals or something that will make a better presentation or a better meal. Also, um, one thing have been working on is the way we order our food. We have so many different vendors, and sometimes your vendors only let you order a certain amount of things. So instead of like 10 pounds of zucchini, I have to get a bushel, which is like, I think like 50 pounds or something, which is like, I mean, it might be wrong, but it's, for example, it's way too much food. So our chef is really interested in reducing our waste. So I've been working on using different vendors to try and get smaller pack sizes so that we're not wasting so much raw food. Because we have the privilege of using fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, really nice products, and we're just throwing it away. It's really heartbreaking. So working with our vendors and really working on the ordering is trying to fine tune all that. And that goes back to your food service management class where you're calculating edible portions and stuff like that. I never thought I'd have to do that, but I do that. So when you get like a broccoli crown and you waste half the crown, you have to calculate how much you need for your recipe. It is trial and error also, but so those are some of the big tasks I've done. And also like another example is, your number 10 cans, they're huge. And, sometimes you only need 1 cup of something, like 1 cup of tomato paste or whatever, and you're wasting the rest of the cans. So I've been trying to find, like the cans that we buy for our homes from our distributors, and whether that's bringing in, new items or whatever it is. But I promise them that it's worth it because we'll buy it. And sometimes your vendors will be good enough to do that, and loyal enough too. So yeah, I just kind of find a need. And once I started bringing to light how much waste we were getting with the pantries and the food ordering and the vendors, people see that, they see the waste and the money, and they're like, yes, please fix it.
Do you think about sustainability in your position?
Even just the energy that we use in the kitchen. I mean, I tell the cooks, like, hey, if you're not using the warmer, turn it off. Like, you don't need to have that on all day at 195 degrees. I mean, if you're not using it, don't like turn it off. And that's hard for cooks to get used to, because when you're flying around the kitchen, you need everything plugged in and on so that you can throw things in or take them out. But I'm trying to shift that. Like, we also have an ice machine that's like big enough to give ice, I think, to the entire Monterey County. And I told my boss, this is a huge waste. And, it's, well, we got to buy another one. I'm like, well, I think the cost is going to outweigh the waste, the water, the energy, the cleaning it is insane. So, trying to find a way that speaks to people, and maybe it's money, but maybe it's also just practicality. I mean, why do we need so much ice? I don't know. But I think like when you work in the front line, like these are things that you notice that maybe your boss doesn't, and it's really important to speak up about, because you know like sustainability and costs, they can go hand in hand, so it's important to point those things out when you see them.
What's your advice for students studying nutrition?
Like I think I mentioned this earlier, when you are in a position and that you may not know if there's other opportunities, but jumping on the fact that there could be, or acting, or being like a proactive team member where you're like, hey, I noticed that our ice machine is massive. Can we do something about this? Because one supervisor said this to me once, which is a great advice. Silence is acceptance. So if you don't say anything, maybe nobody will know, or maybe they know and they already looked into it and it's a dead end. And at least then you're like, okay, check, like I can move on from there. So if you're an idea person, which I kind of am, like I'm not the most creative person, but I see like efficiency things. And so my boss relies on me for that. Where can we cut this? Where can we do that? When you apply yourself to your strengths, your team will also. So um, I'm not, like I said, I'm not the best creative person. So if you ask me to create a handout, I would be like, what? I'll get you the information, but like if I had to put like clip art and like a border, and that's not my thing. My thing is like efficiency, and like I'll check the spelling errors and the commas and things like that. And like being able to play to your strengths helps your team play to your strengths as well. So my biggest advice is, if you want opportunity, to show that you're seeking that, and also play your strengths. So it may take you some time to get there, because I wasn't this confident in my strengths when I first started my career 4-ish years ago. Um, but once you start applying them and finding your strengths, your team will also. And I think that's really powerful, because to use you at the best ability of yourself is great for you and your team. So why wouldn't anybody want to do that? I think it's being able to find those within yourself. So you may start a job that you hate, and that's good, because then you don't want to go back. And I think that when you're in school, and especially in your undergrad, and you're like have this dream of what you want to be as a dietitian, and you hit the real world, like you're going to start learning some lessons that you did not imagine. And all of them are good, though, even if they absolutely aren't. They're still good, because you're learning, okay, I don't like managing people, right? Or I do like managing people, or I don't like doing staffing because it's too stressful and my phone's always ringing off the hook. Um, whatever it is, you know, you'll find out it's a yay or a nay. And I think that that's really powerful. So I would say, you know, really go in with an open mind and be willing to find your strengths and then apply them, because that will be the biggest benefit for you and your career and your team too.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Other like kind of info about this job that's not necessarily in the kitchen or with the patients is like, I guess it's like the leadership part of my job where um and I don't really know what to group this in, but for example, we do quality management meetings. They're quarterly, but we have to always be monitoring something, basically. um, whether it's I monitored how many times we missed something on the tray or how many times we did something right on the tray or whatever. It's always data, there's always numbers, it's reports, it's kind of like how are we like keeping this kitchen, and every department does this, but I'm using the kitchen because I know what we look at, but how are we improving, and then each year you shift them. So it might be looking at portion sizes on the tray. Are they too big? Are they too large? Or you know, how many scoops of this does this, you know, this cook give versus that cook or whatever. So you're basically, it's PI, which is performance improvement. And that's just another part of the job that you look at, and find a way to improve. If it's inconsistent, how do we make it consistent? And also attending meetings and being able to speak to what your department does. So, you know, in nutrition services, this is what we're working on, because we don't meet as a group and discuss like, oh yeah, you know, our walk-in needs to be replaced. Like nobody knows that. So in these meetings, we talk about those things, and that's where you kind of inform the rest of the team that maybe it's not your day-to-day team. Like this is what's happening in nutrition services. We're not just back here, you know, cutting up broccoli. Like there's some other things that are really important that are happening. um, and so that's like the PI, the quality part of the job, that's kind of like an unspoken of thing. And another part of it is like at the end of the month, I always do like month closing. So I have to look at our productivity, which is always, you know, important. But looking at how many meals we produce, how many snacks we make, even how many employees we feed, then looking at our hours, our overtime, our sick time, our this, our that, you know, all these different things that you're looking at. Like we are being this productive in this amount of time, or our non productive hours, or all that. My productivity is tracked too. How many patients I see, how many hours I spend doing this task or that. Um, so those are parts of the job that I think are going to be everywhere, but may not be like something that you do, but it's something that you should know is like being done by somebody in your department. And that's something I look at very closely is productivity, meals, census, things like that. Um, so that's important. And, you know, sometimes you have to attend these meetings, at least at community hospital. They can be bigger meetings, or there can be a lot of people in suits, and it can be kind of intimidating. And you know, but you, I think it's important for you to show up and speak truthfully to what your department or your, you know, section does. And those are not things I learned in undergrad. Those are things I learned from doing. um and you know, you get better at them as they go on, but it can be the unspoken part of the job that you don't really know you need to prepare for until it's here, and you're like got all this data and you don't, you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? well, you present it and you speak proudly of it, or you talk about your interventions and stuff like that. So um, that might be just an organizational thing here at community hospital, but I did it at my other job too. So I think it's important to know and um, try and brace yourself for, I guess.
Thank you so much, Leah, for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our listeners. We hope we provided some insight into what it's like to be a dietetic technician registered working as a nutrition technician. For more information about San Jose State University's Department of Nutrition, Food Science, and Packaging, visit the website below.